Title: When We Meet Again. The first time I saw Ryan Bennett, I was the new kid, trying to figure out how not to stand out. In a high school that didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat for outsiders. He was lounging under the oak tree in the schoolyard, earphones in, flipping lazily through a comic book. Ryan was magnetic. His messy brown hair caught the sunlight, and his green eyes seemed to notice everything. He had that air about him that made people gravitate toward him. Though he didn't seem to care much about it, I didn't expect him to notice me. But on my second day, during lunch, he strolled up to me in the cafeteria, balancing a tray of fries. "You're Lucas, right?" he asked. Like we'd been friends forever. Yeah, I stammered, caught off guard. "Cool. Come sit with me," he said, jerking his head toward an empty table near the window. From that day on, Ryan and I were inseparable. We bonded over late-night video game marathons, shared playlists and talks about dreams. We hadn't told anyone else. One summer evening, we found ourselves at our favorite spot, a clearing near the lake where the stars shone the brightest. "Do you think we'll always stay this close?" Ryan asked, lying back on the grass with his arms folded behind his head. "I don't see why not," I replied, though his question made my chest tighten with a kind of longing I wasn't ready to admit. He turned his head toward me, his green eyes soft in the moonlight. "You ever feel like something's missing, Lucas?" "What do you mean? Like, there's something you want to say, but you're too scared to." My breath caught. I didn't know what to say because the truth was, I did feel that way. Every time I looked at him, I felt it. Before I could think twice, I said, "Yeah, I do." And then he leaned in. It was slow, hesitant, his lips barely brushing against mine, giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't. Instead, I closed the gap, pressing my lips against his. When we pulled back, he looked at me with a mix of relief and something deeper. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Me too," I replied, my heart racing. That night we kissed again and again, unable to get enough of each other. I replied, tears streaming down my face. College was supposed to be our fresh start, but when I finally saw Ryan again, everything felt different. I spotted him across the campus quad, laughing with a guy who looked a lot like the Ryan I used to know. He'd grown taller, his shoulders broader, but his smile was still the same. My heart leapt as I approached him, but then I saw her. A beautiful blonde girl walked up to him, throwing her arms around his neck. He hugged her back, laughing as she kissed his cheek. My chest tightened, and I froze. Had I been a fool to believe in his promises? For weeks I avoided him. I skipped classes he were in. I did not want to face him. I didn't want to look like a fool who was waiting for him for his return for a whole year. I convinced myself that whatever we had was in the past. But Ryan saw me. His eyes looked like an emotion I couldn't understand. He stared at me across from the hall and suddenly ran towards me. Don't know what happened. I started running too. He wasn't the type to let things go. He chased me down the hall, finally catching me in his arms. "Lucas, what the hell is going on?" he said while catching his breath. "Where have you been? I thought you forgot me." His voice was shaky, but his grip on me was tight on me. I tried to free myself, but I couldn't. All the hurt and betrayal I was hiding came rushing to my mind. "Why don't you go back to your girlfriend?" I shot back, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "My what?" he asked, his brows furrowing. "The girl I saw you with," I said, my voice shaking. "It's fine, Ryan. You don't owe me anything." He stared at me for a moment before something clicked in his mind and he burst out laughing. "Lucas, that's Emma," he said, still chuckling. "She's my cousin." I blinked, my mind struggling to catch up. "Your cousin?" "Yes, my cousin," he said, stepping closer, his face becoming serious. "Did you really think I'd move on that easily? After everything we've been through?" I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "I don't know." "Well, now you do," he said, his voice softening. "And for the record, I never stopped loving you." Before I could respond, he cupped my face and kissed me, pouring months of longing into that one moment. He took me back to his apartment, explaining everything, showing all the souvenirs he had brought over the year, thinking about me, and mind I say they were a lot. He looked like so adorable, sharing every part and story which were somehow all connected to me. From that night on, we were inseparable once more. I stopped him from his rant and pulled him into a deep kiss, which something more passionate, something more deep. From that night on, we were inseparable once more. Our reunion was everything I dreamed of and more. Our reunion was everything I dreamed of more. Ryan was bolder now, more confident. He'd pull me into his lap during movie nights, kiss me senseless in the middle of the kitchen, and whisper sweet nothings in my ear when we were alone. One night, as we lay tangled in each other's arms, he traced circles on my chest and said, "You're it for me, Lucas. Always have been, always will be." I smiled, pulling him closer. "You're it for me too, me." We moved in together after graduation, and life became a beautiful blend of shared laughter, quiet mornings, and passionate nights. Ryan was clingy in the best way, always finding excuses to touch me, whether it was holding my hand while we walked, or wrapping his arms around me while I cooked. Our love wasn't perfect. We had our fights and misunderstandings, but we always found our way back to each other. Because at the end of the day, Ryan wasn't just my first love, he was my forever. Like and subscribe for more.